So thank you all for joining us today for the Writing Effective Abstracts of Your Research workshop. Joining us today is Andrew Yim. He is the Assistant Director at the Writing Center. He's going to discuss with you how to effectively write your research abstract in order to persuade readers to review your work. I'm now going to hand it over to Andrew to get us started.
Thank you so much. So, hi everybody. My name is Andrew Yim. I'm currently the assistant director at the UNLV Writing Center. And for today's workshop, we're going to be talking about how to write effective research abstracts. So let's go ahead and share my screen so you're able to view the PowerPoint. Okay, share. Okay, should we share screen? All right. So today we're going to be talking about how to write an effective research abstract. And the goal of today's presentation, we're going to be doing four things for today's presentation. Number one, we're going to be reviewing and developing an understanding of the fundamental structures of a research abstract and their use. Number two, we're going to be talking about how we're going to look at some, current research abstracts as a reference model. And based on those models, we're actually going to evaluate them as sample abstracts to help build your editorial skills. So I have three different abstracts from like three different journals and fields to get you kind of a sense of what abstracts look like. And obviously, I know people want the application. So I've actually gone ahead and prepared a little activity at the end of our session where we're actually going to be composing and revising a abstract for a sample research proposal. And we'll talk more about that towards the end of today's session. So before we get started, there are two questions I would like to ask everyone, and feel free to write your answers in the chat. So depending on what field you're currently in, I would like to know, where have you seen abstracts used in your field? And I also like to know, what do you think is the purpose of an abstract? So I'll give you guys maybe a minute or so to type your answers in and think about these questions. Or also feel free to unmute yourself too if you like to speak your answers out loud.
Great, thank you so much. All right. So far in the chat, we do have one answer, a couple answers. Marina wrote, the purpose of an abstract is to summarize um, the paper. Ege wrote, it's the essence of the paper. We have in research articles, and I think that it's used to give the main idea of what people will be reading. I've read, here's another one. I've read abstracts from research papers from various hospitality journals. I think the purpose is to summarize the main content of a research paper.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think a lot of you guys have kind of hit it on the nail. So I'm just taking some notes of some of the answers. And in a sense, you are going to see abstracts from a lot of different fields. And someone had mentioned hospitality. Um, I come from more of like an English and an English writing background. And then the three examples I pulled from today, they will be covered from different humanities and social sciences. And the purpose of an abstract, in a nutshell, is to not just summarize your research, but it's to help your writers and your readers get a clear sense of what your research project is about, the methodologies you use to, conduct your research, the findings that emerge, and talking about your discussions in a very concise manner. So that takes us to our next slide, which is thinking about the abstract requirements. So depending on the journal you're applying for, and I'll show you the three journals later on the PowerPoint. Generally, abstracts can range anywhere from 50 to 250 words, depending on the journal. So I highly recommend that, once you have completed your research project and you're looking at journals to apply for, you go to the journal you're interested in or the conference proposal and see how many words they're actually looking for, because it can vary depending on the journal, the overall journal. In addition to some things to keep in mind, and I'll show you guys this more in the examples, is generally for most abstracts that I've seen, they're generally around one paragraph, and sometimes it can be double spaced or single spaced depending on the requirements of the journal. And sometimes you might have like keywords that allow your reader or other individuals to figure out what your topic is related to. So we'll look more at some examples that would clearly show you, how long the paragraph should be and what kinds of keywords relate back to your research. In addition to, you want to make sure you're using strong verbs and clear language. And again, um, as we do the as we look through the examples, and we also do the activity at the end, we can talk about what are some like strong verb usage you can use in your overall abstract. So the entire purpose of an abstract is you have to, convince your reader, in a short amount of words, your literature, your methods, and your results. And this is important because, as a reader, you have to convince some audience, right? Whoever your target audience is, you need to show in the abstract, what inspired the research, how you went about and conducted it, the results that emerged, and why others would want to read about your research, right? So it's all about audience awareness. If your audience is convinced of why there's a need for your research, they're more likely to read it, which in turn can get you you have a greater chance of getting accepted into a journal or into a conference. So the question becomes, when will you write an abstract? And I think some of you had identified this earlier on. Someone mentioned like hospitality paper. They read hospitality abstracts. Someone mentioned a conference proposal. So generally, when you are writing or submitting, you want to make sure that you're saving the abstract for the last stage of your writing, because you only have so many words to express yourself. And if you try to write your abstract, somewhere at the beginning or the middle of your research, your abstract's going to change completely because you haven't actually finished your study yet. So I would say when you guys are working on the abstract, save it for the very end once you have done your entire study and you've written your entire paper. So again, you'll see abstracts in research papers for classes. They might be in your dissertation on page 1 or 2. You might find them in different journals. And again, we're going to be looking at journals specifically for today's workshop. You might also find them at conferences, like so when you submit to conference proposals. And also you might find them in grant applications. And I put like a little calendar here as a screenshot, because when you write your abstract, you want to be very mindful of how you plan it in the writing. So again, remember, save it for the very end after you're done with the initial draft. So we want to talk about the importance of abstracts as tools for success, right? Because it's not just a matter of like, oh, I write an abstract and I'm done, right? Number one, when you write an abstract, you're solving a problem that people care about. And once you identify a problem you care about or you're trying to solve, writing your abstract can help you refocus and revise your argument and purpose as you write. So when we look at the 3 examples later on, the 3 examples I'm going to show you should clearly demonstrate, the writer's like, purpose and arguments for their overall paper. In addition, your abstract is going to be one of the first lines of defense when you connect with your editors and your reviewers. So if anyone here has gone through the editorial process, I've gone through it at least 2 or 3 times. I have like 2 or 3 articles that have been accepted. I've had a revise or resubmit, or I have one that's currently getting published with a co-author in the next year or so. And when I was writing my abstract, my abstract had to be very clear, because if you don't have a clear abstract, the journals are not going to necessarily publish you. And especially some of the journals out there in hospitality, business, and English, some of them have very low acceptance rates. So if you don't have a well-rounded abstract, you're going to have a hard time convincing your editor. It's also the reviewers too. So once you guys go through the editing process, your reviewers who will give you feedback on the initial drafts and your second drafts, they will also be looking at your abstract. And if they can't clearly see what your paper's about in your abstract, they're going to be very honest. And sometimes they'll be very brutally honest about your topic. Finally, having a well-read abstract, a well-written abstract will get you found, read, and cited. So oftentimes, a lot of researchers, including myself, I will read an article based on what the abstract tells me, right? So once I look at the keywords and I read and skim through the articles, they will help me decide, am I actually going to invest time in the article, or am I going to move on to something else? So making sure you have your abstract well written will help your target audience find you as an author. So some things I want to talk about in today's session is the difference between APA and MLA. So oftentimes when it comes to abstracts and for people who write APA papers, you want to make sure that when you talk about your research, oftentimes you might be talking about your research in the past tense. And when you talk about your implications in your abstracts, it might be more in the present or future tense. Compared to with like MLA citations, with MLA, generally research will be conducted usually in the present tense, and occasionally you might use the future tense. So again, we'll be looking at these tense shifts in our three examples. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you're writing like an APA style paper, you might be referring more to your research in the past. And if you're writing more of an MLA style paper, might be more in the present. So at the end of the day, I'm going to give you guys obviously the meat of abstracts. The importance of abstracts is you learn to summarize effectively. So this is going to be a really good skill because you're going to be able to learn to summarize all of your text in a very short amount of words. You're going to learn to be clear and concise of what you're actually saying. And finally, you're going to learn to say your abstract in less words. So obviously you're like, Andrew, I need the model, right? Like, where's my model? Where's the application? So now here's the application part. So a lot of times when it comes to abstracts, I know someone mentioned hospitality, there are differences in how journals might approach an abstract, but oftentimes many of them include elements of the IMRAD model. So if you're not familiar with the IMRAD model, I have a nice little chart here. So the IMRAD model refers to introduction, methods or methodology, results, and discussion. And when we look at the IMRAD model, this is one that you can model for all of your abstracts. And I have three examples to make this clear. So obviously this person's thinking, right? Like, what goes in my introduction? What can I think about? And with your introduction, this is where you open up and help the reader understand what do we know about the topic? Why is the topic important? And maybe like what are some research questions that you're trying to answer and why, right? So when you set up your introduction in your abstract, these three questions need to be answered for your reader to be interested. Then we move on to the methodology, right? And with methodology, they can be broken down into the following three approaches, right? So when you think about the different approaches you use for your method section, are you using qualitative methodology? Are you using quantitative methodology, or are you using mixed methods, right? So surveys, interviews, observations, they can, there's a lot of different methodologies out there. Like the ones that I have run for myself in previous, abstracts or studies. I've done a lot of semi-structured interviews where, I interview the person, and because it's a semi-structured interview, I'm able to, change the format of the questions in the moment. So as you guys start exploring different methodologies in your field, think about, what methodologies you're using and if they fall under the qualitative, quantitative, or mixed methods structure. In addition, we have like this nice little chart here for going, for the data set. You really want to be thinking about what did you find as a result of conducting your methodology. So you're not giving your opinion yet. You're simply reporting the facts for what they are, right? If you're not happy with what emerges, well, that's the results, right? The results should simply be the facts that emerge. And also, you want to be thinking about some of the themes that you are identifying in the results section, because once you identify the results, then in your little abstract at the end, you might have a takeaway regarding, what do the findings mean? Or what are your main conclusions, recommendations, or takeaways as a result of the three previous sections? Okay. I know there's a lot of information to throw at you guys in about 20 minutes. So we are going to get to the application very soon. I know you guys want to get that application so we can practice these concepts. So are there any questions so far?
If there are any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or also type them in the chat as well.
Yes, I have a question. Thank you so much, Andrew. This is really interesting. I wanted to know if there's a separate section for the conclusion Or does that just come at the end of the discussion?
Oh, that's a good question. Is it Barbara? Is that how you say your name? Or
Yes, Barbara.
Barbara? Yeah. So Barbara, yeah, the conclusion, and if we go back to the previous slide, yeah, the conclusion and discussion, some of the terms can be interchangeable. So because your abstract is so short, yeah, your conclusion can be your discussion.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
And you don't put in the abstract the limitations, is that correct?
Not necessarily. Like you could like make just like a brief throwaway line about limitations will be addressed, but you don't want to get too specific, right? So in your discussion section, if there were limitations, you could have like maybe like a little throwaway line that take, limitations will be addressed in this paper.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
No problem. Okay. Like I said, if you guys have any more questions, we will be applying these concepts in the actual activity I prepared for today. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at 3 example abstracts that I pulled from different journals. I know everyone here is probably from different fields, so don't worry. I didn't choose 3 English PhD abstracts because you'd be like, Andrew, I'm not an English major. So I try to choose 3 abstracts that you would find across like the social sciences and humanities. And the 2 questions I want us to think about, and I'm not sure if someone wants to type these questions in or if you want to screenshot them, because we'll be thinking about these 2 questions as we look at the 3 examples is, what do these 3 abstracts have in common? And then when I say like, what are the features of these abstracts? I want you guys to be thinking about features regarding like the IMRAD model, right? So where do I see the introduction? Where do I see the methods? Where do I see the results? And where do I see the discussion / conclusion, right? Some of these terms can be, interchangeable with each other. Thank you for typing them in. Okay. So the first article I pulled from, this is actually, so I come from like an English second language writing background as part of like the PhD I'm in currently. So this is like an APA citation. And this is the Journal of Second Language Writing. So some of the requirements for like the Journal of Second Language Writing include their abstracts around like 200 to 250 words. And they also have keywords, included in the overall abstract. So I'll go ahead and read the abstract to you. And then on the next 2 slides, I want you to be thinking about where might the introduction, methods, results, and discussion emerge. So this abstract says, in recent years, multimodal composing has attracted much attention in the field of second language writing. Previous research focused heavily on the pedagogical effects of teaching multimodal writing to L2 students. Less investigated is students' cognitive engagement in the complicated processes of composing multimodal texts. To bridge the research gap, this qualitative study examines the composing processes of 2 groups of L2 writers over 5 weeks, as one group completed a multimodal video project and the other one completed a traditional essay project. Data consists of student screen recordings with a Think Out Loud protocol, written and multimodal products, and post-project interviews. This study showed that the 2 groups shared common behavioral patterns of consulting outside sources and initiating revisions, which might be attributed to similar writing schismas. Students who were tasked to create a video showed more autonomous writing and inconsistent text borrowing behaviors. Pedagogical implications and research suggestions are discussed in the light of the findings. So when we look at this overall abstract, you want to be thinking about what do we classify under the introduction, right? Something that tells the reader, maybe what the research question is, why should we care, like what's the point? Where do you see the methods, right? Like what identifies like how the person conducted the study? What do we classify under the results? Like, what emerged, like what are some of the findings that emerge? And then what might we classify as the discussion, right? Like maybe a few sentences that talk about what to expect. So I'll give you guys maybe a minute or two to think about it. And I do have the answers on the next slides, right? So I'm not going to be like, no, Andrew, where are my answers? So the answers are on the next.
Great. We do have something in the chat from Hugh, I believe. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Hugh writes, the intro is from the beginning until in quotes, composing multimodal texts. I think we may have lost Andrew, but we can go ahead and continue with the discussion so that when he does get back, we can share our points. Raj wrote that the methods are described as a qualitative study and talks about the test groups and what they will be undergoing.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
I think EduRoam. Sometimes I hate EduRoam. Sometimes it just crashes randomly. So is the recording still going or not? I can go back to where we left
No,
off.
the recording is still going. We did get a couple points added to the chat, and yeah, you're good to continue. I see your screen here too.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So hopefully, if you guys like make the video later, you can like cut that out or something. That would help. We'll figure that later. But cool. So some of the answers are in the chat. So I'll give everyone another like 30 to 45 seconds before I kind of go through the answers regarding what falls under the IMRAD model.
Yeah, so far, Hugh brought up that the intro is from the beginning until, in quotes, composing multimodal texts. So Hugh identified the intro, and then Raj mentioned that the methods are described as a qualitative study and talk about the test groups and what they will be undergoing. And then Hannah wrote that the results come in with, begin quote, this study shows, ... end quote.
Cool.
So we
Yeah.
have a couple.
Yeah, so we can go into the answers then. And again, I do promise you guys that we will be applying these strategies into the activity. So if you're like, Andrew, I need application, we will get there soon. So with the introduction, as you guys said, right, the introduction starts from in recent years and ends with multimodal texts. And every introduction in an abstract should, convey to the reader like, why is the research necessary, or what's going on with the research. Then obviously with like the methods, you don't need to be super descriptive, but this does give me like kind of an idea of what the researcher did, right? They identify it's a quality study. They have two groups of L2 writers. It occurred over 5 weeks, and the data consisted of written multimodal products, post-project interviews. So your method section should include enough information that if I read it, I can get a sense of like what you actually did. It's the same with the results section. So again, with the results section, they talk about that the two groups shared common behavioral patterns, and then students were also tasked to create a video that shows like more autonomous writing. So you don't want to like outline all of your results, but give enough to the reader so they can get a sense of what they're going to be seeing as they read your article. And in this case, the discussion was a little bit shorter. So sometimes, like depending on the length of your article or how descriptive you want to be, your discussion section doesn't need to review all of the implications or suggestions. Sometimes you can include like maybe one takeaway from the discussion, or you can be a little bit more broad and say like, oh yeah, we are going to be exploring like implications and suggestions in the findings. So again, for this specific abstract, they focused on the first 3 parts of the IMRAD model, and they give us a little, like teaser for the discussion, which makes me wonder, like, oh, actually, I want to read this article because I need to figure out what are the implications or suggestions based on this first example. So we'll move into the second example then. So I chose one about like Asian American history, because I know UNLV has a very large demographic, Asian demographic. And I also know that this specific abstract can cover a multitude of fields, including education, humanities, social sciences. So here's the abstract. It reads, compared to other groups of color, Asian Americans and their perspectives have rarely been given attention in curriculum studies. This article seeks to address the gap in the literature. It uses Asian crit, a branch of critical race theory, as a theoretical lens to analyze and explicate common patterns across various states' scripting of Asian American experience in their U.S. history standards. Informed by Asian crit, this article describes untroubled invisibility and consecutive messages about Asian Americans and their experience in the story of the United States told from state U.S. history standards. The study suggests the benefit of Asian crit as a theoretical methodological tool to read and disrupt racism embedded in curriculum scripting of US history. The study also adds a new knowledge to the long-held scholarship on inclusion and representation of historically marginalized groups in official school knowledge. And again, they use keywords here, right? So they have keywords Asian American, Asian critical race theory, curriculum analysis, and US history. And when someone reads through this abstract, you know, if they don't really get a clear understanding of what it's about, within a few minutes, they might move on to a new article. So again, we'll do the same thing here. Think about, where the introduction starts, where the methodology lies, where the results are, and then where the discussion is.
Feel free to add your answer to the chat or unmute yourself as well.
And you guys can also think about too is, if you read this abstract, try to get a sense for, the language they're using, right? Because, ultimately with an abstract, the introduction should be clearly telling you, why should we care? The methods should clearly identify, what they're doing. Results, can maybe give us a hint for like what emerges. And then the discussion, sometimes their discussion section, might be a little bit more detailed. And other times they might be a little more generalized and they might say like, oh yeah, we found some implications that we'll further explore in the study.
I think the intro is the first two sentences.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Hannah agrees, and I can see that the results are the last two sentences.
Sure. So yeah, we can go ahead and go over the answers because I want to make sure we have time to actually apply all of these into our activity. So again, I think, yeah, you're right. The first two sentences, right? So the introduction is, compared to other groups of color, Asian Americans and their perspectives have really been given attention to curriculum studies. This article seeks to address the gap in literature. And as you guys can see with the introduction, this gives a clear understanding to me as a reader that, okay, if I'm a person looking to do research on Asian American studies or curriculum studies and focus on Asian population, this article sounds interesting because I never knew that there was a gap in the literature. Then moving on to methods, they identify this idea called like Asian crit, or it's like Asian critical race theory. And they try to give, a little background about it. It's like a lens to examine and explicate, common patterns across various states scripting of Asian American experiences in US history standards. So now I start to understand that, oh, Asian crit is this like methodological tool that we can use to examine, Asian American experiences throughout US history. Then with the discussion, right? So by using Asian critical race theory, the article, will talk about and explain like, okay, there's been this issue of invisibility and messaging for Asian Americans throughout, US history. And it also talks about, the benefits as a methodological tool to disrupt racism, right? So like, oh, if I was someone who's interested in critical race theory or similar topics, this sounds like a really interesting article to me. And then finally, again, with the discussion, they talk about it adds a new knowledge to the long-held scholarship on inclusion and representation of historically marginalized groups in official school knowledge, right? So this is kind of like a future takeaway that the study is going to, help, expand on, critical race theory or even critical race theory as an overall theme. All right. So we're going to look at the third article then before we go into our activity. So the third article, again, I pulled it from international student research for undergraduates because I feel like, again, this can refer to a lot of different fields, education, social science, the humanities. And this abstract reads, using a large data set from a state education system, this study examined the experience of international college students in the United States, as well as the connection to their cognitive, affective, and civic outcomes. The study utilized data from the 2010 University of California Undergraduate Experience Survey, UCUES, and a sample of 35146 junior and senior undergraduate students across 10 campuses. The results of the study show that international students may uniquely experience college and may not benefit from those experiences as much as those domestic peers. Furthermore, the study identified a broad range of college experiences that contribute to the key outcomes for international students. The study discusses the theoretical and practical implications of the findings. And again, they have keywords like international students, college experiences, college outcomes, and research universities. So for anyone here who's interested in education and international students, this might be an article that they're interested in.
Hugh wrote that they think that the introduction is actually at the end, specifically the last 2 or 3 sentences. And Hannah pointed out that the methods are in the first 2 sentences. One thing I noticed is that they were very there were actually numbers to the methodology in this abstract.
Mhm. Yeah. So you guys do have some good points here. So again, with the IMRAD model, like the first 2 examples do showcase, more of like introduction, methods, results, and discussions. As I mentioned earlier on, with certain journals, with certain journals, sometimes it's not necessarily going to require like you to like have as much information in the other sections, but as long as you have like those elements within the abstracts, that's what's important. So again, we'll go through some of my answers, and then we'll talk about what the abstract looks like in this case. So in this case, again, I kind of went with the initial IMRAN model with the introduction being at the beginning, but everyone's answers, you're not necessarily wrong, right? Because the IMRAN model can be used in different elements, and you don't necessarily have to always follow the structure as long as you see the elements being in place. But for this case, I identified as the introduction in the second half because, the study is examining the experience of international college students in the United States, as well as the connection to their cognitive, affective, and civic outcomes. Again, with the methodology, again, they're utilizing data from the 2010 University of California undergraduate experience survey, and they're also using a sample, for juniors and seniors across the 10 campuses. So again, with the results come towards the end, right? When they talk about like international students may not be uniquely, show that they may be uniquely experienced college and may not benefit from those experiences as much as domestic peers. Furthermore, they identify a broad range of college experiences contribute to the key outcomes for international students. So again, for someone who's interested in international student research and maybe works in the educational office, these results would be useful for them. And then finally, with the discussion, the study discusses the theoretical and practical implications of the findings. So regarding the introduction, so yeah, I do agree with the introduction. Sometimes like with this example here, it might also fall under the methodology a little bit. So do know that sometimes with the 4 parts of the IMRAN model, you're going to use, parts of it at times, and other parts you might have less words to say. But as long as you have those 4 elements somewhere in the paragraph, that's what helps you at the end of the day. So we're going to be moving into our fixing abstracts activity. So as part of the practice with abstracts, my general rule of advice is, because abstracts are usually written after you complete your research, the activity we're going to be doing today is we're actually going to be revising 3 sample abstracts that have like elements of the IMRAN model in it. But I want you guys to be thinking about these 2 questions as we look at the examples. So number 1, when we look at the fixing abstracts activity, question 1 is, what, if anything, is missing from these 3 overall abstracts? Then question 2 we want to think about is, how would you revise sample abstracts 1, 2, and 3? Please go ahead and provide your revisions on the following pages. So I'm going to go ahead and drop the link to Google into the box, into the chat box here. Stop sharing my screen here. I'm going to drop the activity into the chat box now. And if you guys want to go ahead and enter the Google Doc, I will explain what you'll do for the next 10 minutes or so to kind of practice, working on abstracts. So as you guys can see here, we've gone ahead and prepared a handout that focuses on fixing abstracts activity. And as you guys make your way into the box, you're going to see 3 abstracts down below that have like one or more of the elements of the overall IMRAD model, but it's not very complete. So what we're going to do is we're going to work on sample abstract 1 in particular first, and then if we have time, we might move to abstracts 2 and 3. But now that we've talked all about the, overall functions of an abstract, we talked about the IMRAD model, we've looked at examples, I want to take the last part of today to actually do application. So sample abstract 1 reads, through surveys and interviews of 433 doctoral faculty and students, we explore professional self-care practices and related issues of academic guilt, imposter syndrome, and burnout. We argue that self-care should be included as professional practice, taught, and modeled to prepare doctoral students for careers as functional and healthy faculty. So regarding sample abstract 1, the 2 questions I had asked earlier, question 1 is, what if anything is missing from these 3 abstracts? So from abstract 1, what is missing from that example? Then you think about question 2, how would you revise sample abstracts 1, 2, and 3? And you said that, sorry, Hannah, you said the document's not shareable. Let me try sharing it one more time. Okay. Let me try posting it one more time here. Okay. So try accessing the document now and see if that works. You should be able to access the document.
It's good. Looks like you can edit it now.
Perfect. So what you guys are going to do is we're going to work on this, as collective group, and this will be helpful for me to give some people feedback as you're writing. Go ahead and take a look at sample abstract 1. Think about what is there, what is missing, and then in the sample 1 abstract answers down below, identify what's missing and go ahead and try to expand on it. And the reason we're doing this activity is because it is hard to come up with a sample abstract without actually having done the research. So by doing this activity, my goal is to help you guys, understand the overall elements. So once you do have your topic in place down the road, then you'll be able to take this activity, look at people's answers and, use them to formulate your own abstracts. And yeah, like I said, we have till 12 o'clock. So my goal is to try to get through sample abstract 1. And if we have time, we might move to 2. Otherwise, that's what we're doing for the rest of the day today. So we're going to be working on this activity together, make it interactive.
Well, we're working on the activity, Andrew. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure. That's what we'll do. You work on the activity and I'll answer questions at the same time.
Great. So I realized that my first question about the conclusion had to do with the fact that some abstracts that I've seen actually break out IMRAD with bolded, introduction and then, the results, discussion, etc. Does that depend on the journal, or is that something that you should do if the journal doesn't specify?
So question. So you're talking about they actually bold introduction,
Yes.
methods,
Yeah,
results,
results, right, and discussion methods. Yeah, those bolded and then the 1 or 2 sentences. Does that depend on the journal, or is that up to the author?
I think it's going to be probably more of the journal requirements because, again, like I said, different disciplines do abstract slightly differently. So it might just be that specific journal wanted them to make clear what the introduction was, what the methods were, what the results were, and what the discussion was. So I think it just depends on the journal because I've submitted to at least 5 or 6 journals in the past year, and I have never seen that requirement before. But I'm also in English, right? So maybe it's a little bit different in other disciplines.
Yeah, I'm in public health, so that's where I've seen it. Yeah, okay, thank you.
No worries. And then as you guys are adding to the sample abstract answers, oh yeah, Raj, you have a question?
Just wanted to go off of what Barbara was talking about. I'm in more biology field, but whenever I read papers that are more clinical, talking about patients and things like that, more public health type stuff, I see the breaks in the abstract versus when it's just primary research paper, then they're not there.
No, thanks for sharing. Appreciate that. So yeah, like I said, if there's anyone here who wants me to like take a look at their abstract as you're writing it, let me know. Yeah, and like I said too, if you guys want to move on to samples 2 and 3, you can also do that too. So for um, sample two says like the current study examined the extent to which speakers of North American and Singapore English differentially perceive the comprehensibility of second language speech, whereas the rater's comprehensibility judgments were generally influenced by phonological and temporal qualities as primary cues, and to a lesser extent, lexical and grammatical qualities of L2 speech as secondary cues. Their linguistic backgrounds did make some impact on their L2 speech assessment patterns. This suggests that the background of the speaker is an important influence. So again, this one is definitely more like L2 writing English, but again, you can do the same for samples two, abstracts 2. And then with abstract 3, this one will be the longer one, but sometimes like you might have like a very long abstract that looks good on paper, but then you kind of realize that there's a lot of information that doesn't need to be there, right? So sample abstract 3 says universities, public schools, private schools, and any educational institutions in general seek naturally to provide a high quality learning environment. Due to the fact that teachers play an important role in these educational institutions and demonstrate the nature and status of the school where they work by the teaching process, it is normal to hear or read that educational sectors provide jobs, particularly for well-performing teachers, in order to reach that high-quality learning environment. Teachers, particularly graduate students enrolled in teaching trainer programs and courses, need support and qualification to be able to teach and provide students with various knowledge in an effective educational environment. We have heard about teacher training programs and courses in several disciplines related to education and teaching that focus on providing graduate students with field experience or practice in teaching. Although these practices still exist in universities and teacher training programs, Ashani Delaney claimed that these courses do not qualify pre-service teachers to face every professional challenge, and thus mentoring programs are the solution, right? So in an actual paragraph, that paragraph could function well in some part of your intro, body, or conclusion. But as an abstract, there's a lot of information there. So with abstract 3, you can think about maybe what we need to take out or add. So yeah, if you guys want to work on all 3, and we have till 12 o'clock, so we know I'll start looking at some of your answers here and see if there's any questions. Okay, yeah, so methods are more detailed. Why is this research topic important? Methods should be expanded upon, results are missing. Also, an introduction gives more background info would be helpful before you methods begin. Significant of the research starting. There's no main outcome. Results are obvious. Yeah, okay, so through the Jasmine, college students explain issues with definitely go. Through surveys of funds to explore self-criticism and the issues of mental health. Right now, that's self-care. Yeah, so regarding like sample abstract 1, I read through everyone's general answers and thank you for sharing. So I do agree with a lot of the assessments of sample abstract 1. With sample abstract 1, they do give a methodology, but there's not really an introduction, right? Like I'm not sure why should I care about the research, right? So yeah, you are interviewing all these people, you're talking about professional self-care practices, but why should I care? I don't really feel like if I was a reader, I would be like, okay, I don't really know why this research would help my topic. In addition, there's not much about the results section. They just mentioned that self-care should be included as a professional practice, and there isn't much of a discussion section either. So they have things for the methodology, but I still need more of a connection of why the research should speak to me. And then, yeah, I see Jasmine, you write an example. Thank you for that. So it's coming along. Oh yeah, if you guys need more boxes, yeah, I can add some more boxes here. You can just add it down below. So yeah, it looks like people are starting to work on sample abstract 2. So like I said, once we're done at 12 o'clock, feel free to always refer back to this document. And this is a good way to kind of practice your abstract building skills, because once you complete your research study, you guys can take the IMRAD model and apply it moving forward. So, and if anyone here wants any feedback from me, let me know. I can give you some feedback on the abstract we wrote. And like I said, guys, thank you guys so much for coming today to our workshop. I'll stick around for like the next 3 to 5 minutes, unless there's another workshop after this, and I'm here to answer any other questions about the abstracts. But I'm looking through everyone's answers right now, and yeah, I do agree that everyone is identifying some of the issues with abstracts 1, 2, and 3. And again, if there's like any questions you guys have about any of these 3 examples, let me know. Because I do know with, when it comes to abstracts, I can give you all the information in the world at the end of the day, but, the only way you get better writing abstracts is seeing good models and then looking at bad models and trying to improve upon the bad models. So yeah, I hope this was helpful.
Thank you guys. So as Andrew mentioned, he's going to stick around for a couple more minutes. That way you guys can get any remaining questions that you have answered. I would also like to just thank Andrew for joining us today as our presenter and sharing your time and expertise. And a big thank you to everyone, all of the participants who joined us today. As I mentioned before you log off, or maybe later if you have the time, please go ahead and fill out that feedback survey. I hope everyone has a great day as well. Thank you.